"It's just horses, Cassidy, get over it." The words echoed in the humid air of the farmer's market. My stomach dropped as my mother's voice cut through the crowd, each word dripping with dismissal. Sun beat down on the gingham tablecloth, the sweet scent of lavender honey thick in the air, a stark contrast to the bitterness rising in my throat. My hands trembled, but I stood firm. Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I remained composed. Then Dr. Hefner walked up and said, "Cassidy's mare could have died." A buyer had just emailed me my prize foal sold. Ever felt that sting? Subscribe for more. It's a tale of turning tables, trust me, the ending will blow your mind. It hadn't always been this way, this blatant disregard. 10 years prior, on my 25th birthday, the gulf began to widen. While Sierra received a brand new convertible cherry red, top down, the embodiment of freedom, I received a set of used horseshoeing tools. Dad said, "You'll need them, Cassidy. Horses are a tough business." The metallic tang of the tools filled the small room, a constant reminder of the grit and labor that defined my life. The contrast was blinding. Years blurred into a pattern. Sierra's college tuition, vacations abroad, a trust fund that seemed to replenish itself, all flowed freely. Meanwhile, I meticulously tracked every penny, reinvesting every possible dollar back into Clearwater Farms. One Christmas, while Sierra unwrapped a diamond necklace, Mom said, "Cassidy doesn't need much, she has her horses." The ice in my veins froze solid, a constant reminder that my passion was perceived as a lack of ambition. The final straw wasn't a single event, it was a culmination. Last spring, my grandfather passed away, leaving behind his prized pocket knife. It was an heirloom, a symbol of our family's history and resilience. Instead of leaving it to me, the eldest, it was given to Sierra. "She'll appreciate it more," my father explained. The knife, now tarnished and dull, sat displayed on Sierra's Instagram. The wound was deep and festering, the knife a constant reminder of my rejection. It was the last straw, the moment I knew things had to change. For years, I endured cracked hands, perpetually stained with dirt and liniment, the constant ache in my back from mucking stalls, the early morning chill that seeped into my bones. The smell of hay and manure, once comforting, became a constant reminder of my perceived failure in their eyes. I built Clearwater Farms on sweat and strategy, on tireless days and sleepless nights, on a burning desire to prove them wrong. No handouts, no shortcuts, no excuses. My success was silent, strategic. I intentionally kept my farm's true value hidden. While Sierra flaunted her every purchase, I reinvested my profits, expanding my operation, buying new equipment, and carefully improving my bloodlines. I savored the small victories, a champion foal, a lucrative sale, a satisfied customer. Yet I never revealed the full extent of my achievements to my family. It was a shield, a way to protect my hard-won empire from their careless hands. Then 3 years passed. Clearwater Farms grew, my stock highly sought after. Suddenly, my parents wanted to visit, suggesting that I come home more often, even suggesting that I sell them a horse. I paused when I saw the email. "We'd love to see the farm," Mom wrote, "and maybe pick up a nice pony for the grandkids." The veiled request, the subtle manipulation, was a familiar tactic. "Of course," I replied, but I knew the time was approaching for them to see what I had built. I remember the day my parents came. I watched their faces as I showed them around the farm, carefully curated to appear successful but not extravagant. I had intentionally hidden my newest stallion, a prize-winning Arabian. I had hidden the books, the finances, everything that would reveal my true wealth. Mom looked around and said, "It's a nice little place you have here, Cassidy." But she added, "Have you thought about getting a real job?" 2 years later, I expanded into equine therapy. The silence was no longer about protection but about control. My silence was now a tool for power. I kept my success hidden, not out of fear but out of choice. The county fair buzzed, a kaleidoscope of noise and smells, fried dough, livestock, and nervous anticipation. A notification popped up on my phone, "Harmon Family Reunion, July 4th. My stomach clenched. 10 years. Had it really been that long since I'd broken bread with them? A knot formed in my throat. "Maybe it's time," I muttered, a whisper lost in the crowd's roar. I checked my schedule, a flurry of emails, appointments, deadlines. This was my life now, a world away from the farmhand they expected. I paused, I decided to do it. It was a calculated risk, a chance to observe, to assess, to finally understand the dynamics that had shaped my past. Time to dust off my social skills, I guess. The day arrived, sweltering and humid. I parked my car a block away from the park and took a deep breath. I practiced my calm, practiced my smile, and walked the rest of the way. As I approached, the familiar cacophony washed over me, children shrieking, aunts gossiping, uncles boasting. They hadn't changed. The scene was a caricature of every family gathering I remembered: checkered tablecloths, plastic cutlery, and the aroma of cheap barbecue. Sierra, radiant in a designer dress, held court, her laughter echoing above the din. My parents beamed, their eyes crinkling with pride. The knife dangled from her neck on a delicate gold chain. A wave of anger washed over me, but I pushed it down, replacing it with a practiced smile. "Cassidy, you made it." My mother's voice, laced with surprise, broke through my reverie. She pulled me into a hug, smelling faintly of mothballs and desperation. Dad clapped me on the back, his eyes scanning my worn jeans and simple shirt. "Still playing farmer, I see." The familiar condescension stung. He hadn't noticed my new watch or my new truck, he was oblivious. Sierra glided over, her smile saccharine sweet. "Cassidy, darling, you look healthy." Her eyes lingered on my calloused hands, a silent judgment. "So how's the farm?" I took a deep breath, ready. "Thriving, actually," I said, carefully calibrating my tone. "We've expanded into equine therapy. It's been surprisingly lucrative." Their eyes widened, a flicker of surprise quickly masked by polite disinterest. The truth was far grander than they could imagine. I just smiled and watched them eat. My voice, though quiet, cut through the din. "Lucrative enough to buy out the neighboring farm, actually." A beat of silence hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. Then the floodgates opened. "Buy out? What neighboring farm?" My mother's voice, sharp and incredulous, sliced through the murmur of conversation. "The old Peterson place," I replied, watching the color drain from Sierra's face. Dad sputtered, "But that's a huge operation. How could you possibly afford that?" I simply smiled. "Clearwater Farms has been doing quite well. Dr. Hefner can attest." The expressions around the picnic table were priceless. Sierra's carefully constructed facade of nonchalance crumbled, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Her mouth hung slightly open, the sparkle in her eyes replaced by a flicker of something akin to fear. Mom's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed, calculating. Dad looked utterly dumbfounded, his hand frozen mid-air, a half-eaten hot dog suspended between the plate and his mouth. The weight of their condescension, their pity, the years of dismissive remarks, all seemed to dissipate in that single moment. Clearwater Farms had always been my sanctuary, my refuge from their constant disapproval. But now it was my vindication, my weapon. "We're breeding champion quarter horses," I continued, watching their reactions with detached amusement. "And now we're expanding into therapeutic riding for veterans." Aunt Carol gasped, "Therapeutic riding? That's wonderful, Cassidy." The support, however small, was like a balm. I nodded, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. It's rewarding and it's good business." My words hung in the air, a challenge to their long-held perception of me. They stared, mouths agape. Sierra's eyes narrowed, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and disbelief. But you always acted like you were struggling," she stammered. I shrugged. "Did I?" Inside, I was dancing. "What do you mean?" Dad asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "How can you afford all that?" "Years of hard work, careful planning, and a little bit of luck," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "And of course, keeping my finances to myself." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother interjected, recovering first. "You're exaggerating, Cassidy." "You always do." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Am I, Mom? Check the county records." Silence. My father cleared his throat, attempting a more conciliatory tone. "Cassidy, honey, why didn't you tell us all this? We're your family, we could have helped." The hypocrisy was almost comical. "Helped how, Dad? By needing a handout? That's never been your style." Sierra shifted, a desperate glint in her eyes. "Look, Cassidy," she began, her voice sickeningly sweet. "This is great, really, but about that investment I was telling you about, with the crypto, now that you're doing so well." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "No, not happening, Sierra." "But Cassidy, you laughed then, you're not laughing now." Mom leaned forward. "Cassidy, you know Sierra has expensive tastes, we were hoping you could." I looked at my sister, then my parents. They seemed to believe I should just fall into line. "I can't, Mom, I have to protect Fern, I have to protect Clearwater Farms." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I knew I'd won. "So," I finally said, breaking the tension. "Anyone want a mint?" The knife glinted. The mince remained untouched. My mother's face hardened. "There's more to this, isn't there?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "What aren't you telling us, Cassidy?" I sighed inwardly. They always had to push. "Let's just say I've been diversifying my assets," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Diversifying? What does that even mean?" Sierra snapped, her voice laced with venom. "Are you suddenly some kind of financial guru?" I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Not a guru, darling," I purred. "But I do have a rather substantial holding in Harmon Industries." The effect was instantaneous. Their faces went ashen, their eyes widening in disbelief. Harmon Industries, the family business, the very foundation of their wealth and status, the controlling interest was also something I controlled. My father, who had been silently seething, finally found his voice. "That's impossible," he croaked, his face paling. You can't. Those shares have been in the family for generations." "And now," I said, pulling out a leather keychain and extending my hand, "they're in mine." I dropped the keychain to the picnic table. "How?" Sierra shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "How could you possibly get your hands on those shares?" "Through meticulous planning, strategic acquisitions, and a little bit of legal maneuvering," I explained, keeping my voice calm and even. "You see, when Grandpa passed, I reviewed all the paperwork. He had provided that if certain financial targets were met by Clearwater Farms, a certain percentage of controlling shares would be transferred to me. Those targets were met, and exceeded some time ago," I continued, watching their faces crumble. "The transfer was automatic. You were all too busy dismissing me to notice." A wave of nausea washed over my mother, her hand flying to her chest. "The business. You control the business." "A significant portion, yes," I confirmed. "Enough to have a say in major decisions." Sierra's carefully applied makeup seemed to crack under the strain. You did this on purpose," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This was all a game to you." "Not a game, Sierra," I corrected, my voice hardening. "Justice." "You wanted the knife, I'll hand you the whole knife factory." Dad was still silent, his face buried in his hands. "What did you do with the knife?" I asked Sierra point blank. "It's right here," she cried, showing me the silver blade. "Good," I said, "you can cut the tension with it." I stood up, brushing off my pants. "Enjoy the rest of the reunion," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I have horses to tend to." As I walked away, I heard Sierra's desperate plea. "Cassidy, wait, we need to talk." I didn't turn back. Months turned into a year. Occasional texts trickled in, hollow apologies mixed with thinly veiled requests for assistance. I read them, sometimes responding with a curt "noted," other times letting them fade into the digital ether. The farm flourished, the horses sleek and healthy, their hooves thundering a rhythm of peace. The constant knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a quiet sense of self-assuredness. There were still moments of sadness, a pang of longing for the family I once envisioned. But the silence was now a choice, a boundary fiercely guarded. I focused on building a stronger support network, leaning on friends, mentors, and fellow breeders who understood the sacrifices I had made. The farm was thriving, the therapy program a success, and I spent my free time reading. Looking back, I realized that the true victory wasn't just about financial independence or control of Harmon Industries. It was about finally freeing myself from the weight of their expectations, from the need for their approval. The years of striving to prove myself had ultimately led me to a place where their validation no longer mattered. The farm was no longer a symbol of defiance, it was a testament to my own resilience and strength. In the end, I learned that true power isn't about dominating others, but about owning your own story, defining your own worth, and living life on your own terms. The knife remains on the table. With it, I have cut away all that does not serve me. My freedom had been earned. Relatable, right? Don't just read, live your story. Share yours, inspire others to claim their success. True victory, it's not revenge, it's freedom.